right. Welcome, everybody, to the Bacon, Bibles, and Barbells Podcast. I am Coach Justin, joined by Coach Bill and Coach Amanda. We are going to talk today about chiropractors and physical therapists, what they can and can't do for your health, potentially, what the positives and negatives may be working with one, when you could work with one, when it may be helpful in your best interest, etc. But before we do that, let's do a quick roundtable, talk about what we're doing in our training and everything. We all have different goals, different things we're working on right now. So Amanda, where are you right now? What are you working on? How's that going?
Finally settling into our new gym now that we've been there for about a month, learned all the equipment, kind of figuring out what's not working and what is working. I'm making some program adjustments. Also, lately, my upper body's been growing just exponentially faster than lower. So we're going from an upper lower split to lower upper lower and then a full body day with a lower emphasis. So really going to kill the lower body and see what kind of growth we could get right now. Diet's been going great. So finally getting used to a good amount of food since I wasn't eating enough when we were moving, but now we're settling in and that's getting back on track. So
I can't wait to be eating more food.
I know.
Yeah. Well, I'm sick this week, so I'm on a cut, but I am taking, of course, a few days as I feel the worst symptoms to come back up to maintenance. I'm not doing any lifting, very little walking just because I have a cough. Anything below the neck, I usually don't mess with. But still doing around, 5,000-7,000 steps a day just to sort of stay regularly active. Nothing too crazy. Like I said, no lifting right now because you get that extra immune response. I'm eating more. So, of course, the scale goes up by 4 or 5 pounds just because you have more water. I'm inflamed. And so that's normal, as well, to see some increase in water weight and all that good stuff. So just going to let myself heal. Food and rest are sort of the real healers in this case. I'm trying to get some sunlight when I can and feel good enough to go outside. But other than that, just recovering right now. But when I'm not, I'm in the gym pretty hard 4 or 5 days a week. Nothing over 9 reps right now on the cut. Just really working on strength to keep muscle. The particular exercises I'm doing are actually built around helping with jiu-jitsu specifically. And so I'll have a PDF and some video content on that soon for folks that are interested. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, cool.
Awesome.
I'm still on my cut. I'm going to finish out this month. So I've got a few more weeks, about 3.5 more weeks of my cut. I'm hoping I'll probably just lose a couple more pounds this month. I'm not being hyper aggressive with it. Probably eating 2,200, 2,400 calories a day, which will probably be about right for me to lose 2 or 3 pounds of body fat. Scale's actually been going up even once I resumed my cut last week. It's probably just water and stuff. No real visible changes other than, getting more flat again, that kind of thing. But I just pay attention to the scale less and less. Honestly, I thought by this point I'd weigh into the 240s, but I'm still in the low 250s. But things are looking way leaner. I may have, with the high volume training, a relatively high volume training I'm doing, compared to, baseline for a strength athlete anyway. Maybe I might have gained some muscle mass. It's tough to tell. I'm especially on my back. I'm kind of wondering, and my legs have probably leaned out the most. But I still have maintained about the same leg size. And so I'm kind of wondering if maybe there's been some leg growth. I've done a lot of fairly heavy leg press at this point. So that's probably contributed to some of that. And even like my arms, I've stayed above 18 inches, even when I'm like flat in the morning, which is just a hair less than I was before I started this. My arms are definitely leaner. So, and my waist has gone down. So it's not been some sort of crazy physical, transformation. But I think that once everything gets back to normal, I'm on maintenance next month. It'll be interesting to see how I look once everything fills back out on maintenance, which takes 2 to 4 weeks anyway. So it won't be till the end of June before the full difference is there. Obviously we could try to manipulate that to be faster with, heavy feeding and other things like that, but I don't plan to do that kind of thing. I might go heavy on salt for a little bit, just to see, but don't anticipate anything huge there. And somewhat of a foreshadowing, we're going to have a couple cool videos released for High Calling Fitness, actually, which is part of the reason I'm going back to maintenance at that time, so I look okay, at least. So everyone can look forward to some of that. Just it'll be some cool explanation about what we're doing as a brand and some other things for people's information and benefit. So let's move to our topic today. Again, chiropractors and physical therapists. We've all of us have experience working with them ourselves, just like most people, and also working with clients that are working with physical therapists and chiropractors. We've run into various pitfalls and also seen, I think, some help sometimes as well. I actually used to see a chiropractor all the time before I started lifting because of chronic back pain, which I no longer have. And I personally haven't actually been to a chiropractor in like 8 years since I started actually training heavy and like really gaining weight and muscle mass. So anyway, what I'd like to do is kind of talk about one than the other. I think physical therapists are easier to start the topic off with. They do many things. A physical therapist is often utilized in a rehab setting post-surgery, or an injury setting post like any type of major injury, and also other things like that. But usually that's what people are going for, is rehabbing a tweak or something along those lines. So, and I think, Amanda, you've had a lot of experience working with PTs right in your gymnast days.
I have, just from all the injuries that I've had. So
yeah,
lots of experience there.
So what was your takeaway in your personal experience as far as like the efficacy and how well that worked for you? And in hindsight, would you have done anything differently?
I can think of some injuries I would have done differently and some that I wouldn't. And it very much depends on who the physical therapist is and how knowledgeable they are, how high volume the clinic is, because those ones, they just tend to be not paying quite as much attention and giving the same routine week after week. We know as coaches what progressive overload is, and sometimes those higher volume clinics don't use that kind of principle. Obviously, you're starting at a way weaker point when you're injured, but you should progress. And I've had injuries that have had therapy, and it was like the same weight that I'd be using from the first week to the last. And so that wasn't really very beneficial. But others, I remember for a knee injury I had a really great physical therapist, really helped me. And I was actually like, he didn't care to have me the whole 6 weeks. He wanted me to be better. And I think was out in 4. So when you have someone that actually cares about you getting better, not just fulfilling this whole protocol and getting a paycheck from it, they're a lot better to work with. But sometimes it's just go through the motions, and here's a worksheet of exercises that you should do when you're home, which they don't really walk you through, and hardly anybody does.
Yeah. I would agree. I think that a big key to know if you're working with someone that's going to be helpful to you is, do they give you homework? Because the half hour or maybe hour that you get in the clinical setting, once a week, you can't really promote much of a physical transformation in that amount of time. Just like if someone came to us and was like, well, so what if I did a 1 hour gym session a week? What would I expect? Well, not much. And the same, I think, is true in the PT world. So Bill, what about your experience personally?
Yeah, I have one really good PT that I think I've ever met in my life. And he is located pretty locally here. And he does a good job of using progressive overload, but that's because his PT place is a gym rather than just a regular old PT place. It actually has a fully functioning gym with racks and barbells and all those kinds of things. And so he was an Olympic lifter himself and a judo competitor. And so he has a really good understanding of what it takes to return to sport properly. And much of what he gives is very little of general PT protocol. And so you'll see a lot of folks in there with really severe knee injuries, but if they're lateral injuries, they're still squatting with heavy weights. If they are anterior, injuries to the knee, then he's still got them doing things like leg extensions with lighter weight at first to strengthen, blood flow restriction training where they can't, produce force, and all those kinds of things. So not a ton of like balancing on balls or anything like that, or weird stepping patterns or,
Bosu
whatever.
balls.
A great deal of it is actual really hard. Everyone you go in there and you see will be sweating because it is really difficult therapy. But that's the way that it should be designed, right? And so I would say I haven't seen much in the way of good physical therapy with most clients, and some of their kids that have injuries for sports that I've dealt with. Most of what I've seen has been that sort of cookie cutter PT mill, where they are unfortunately paid by the visit, and they are an ancillary for insurance requirements to get things like MRIs and, cortisone shots for certain joints and things like that have inflammation. And so unfortunately they are using that practice to serve as that intermediary, for the insurance company and for the doctors. And it is in their best interest to unfortunately keep folks in there for as many visits as they can. And I know that sounds sort of like doctor conspiracy theory, but in the case of physical therapists, it actually is technically the business model. They don't make money if you're not there. And so the reality is that's sort of, any place like that's a big mill. I'm not going to say any names here, but there are some that people probably know that are big national names for PT and orthopedics that are really, really terrible examples of how to heal the human body. But I think probably the best thing I've ever heard, right, out of somebody that was sort of joking about this was the PT that I was talking about. And he said, PT is really about doing something painful until you make a change. And he's right? Like you do have to work through painful modalities and ranges. And so things like, don't take that to the painful range is kind of absurd when you think about physiology. Every injury has a directional preference. And so the range that you can move into, where pain is produced and the level of force production that's reduced because of the pain is going to vary based on the directional preference, the depth of the injury, the severity of the injury. If you have a completely torn muscle, of course, you don't want to take it in the directional preference of the injury. That's going to be really dumb because it's never going to come back together.
Yeah.
But if you have like a grade 1 or even a grade 2 tear, you can run that pretty deep. You have supportive structures that are going to help that muscle go through that range. And so there are things like that. Don't go through a painful range. Don't do any type of pressing if you've got a shoulder issue. Don't do this. Don't do that. And that stuff just doesn't make a ton of sense when you look at how physiology and rehabilitation of muscular and skeletal, structures work. So,
I agree. I think that common threads that we would say to look for would be someone that has a smaller independent practice is more likely to give you a better quality service. Someone that's going to be able to give you individual attention, you get the same person every time, and that is sort of invested in like, oh, you did this last week, so we're going to do this the following week to progress you, so you're not doing the same thing every week. And I think that there's even a the other thing too is like when you walk into their clinic, are there free weights in the gym? If there's are no free weights, then and it's like a cable machine and bands, you might not be in the right place. It might be someone that isn't really interested in strengthening, but rather purely restoring range of motion, which has utility like post-surgery and other things like that and post-severe injury. But that is only going to get you so far. You can typically get range of motion pretty rapidly. But that doesn't lead to ongoing strengthening of, the joint or whatever needs to be healed. For my own part, I've done physical therapy I work with 2 physical therapists, so not as much experience as you guys might have personally. Most of my experience has been with my clients. And one of them was when I broke my arm. It was in a cast for 6 weeks when I was much younger. We just had to restore range of motion. But because I was a kid, like because of playing and things like that, the strength came back, and that arm it's my dominant arm. So it's stronger than the other arm, and it's wasn't really a thing to worry about as far as strengthening. It was just, and that PT was good because he just told me to stretch my wrist out, basically. And it was like, well, you can just come once a week and it's no big deal if you just stretch at home a bunch. And I did. And I had full range of motion, like a month or two later. Wasn't a big deal. When I first got out of the cast, my wrist would barely bend at all. And that's all that was really needed. The other physical therapist I worked with was for a glute injury that I've talked about in the past. And I didn't really get any good results. I ended up actually injuring it worse, losing muscle mass and things like that. And this actually was a PT that had a strongman background, an Olympic lifting background. But the issue was when he was working with someone that in a rehab setting like that, he adhered too strictly to the normal like clinical dogma and protocols. And, my results didn't really follow. And he was unwilling to adjust his approach during that time, even though the results weren't there. And he was very frustrated numerous times, like, man, you're defying all the models. I don't get it. Like, why isn't this working? And there was no like introspection on, maybe I should approach this differently. So you can get a mixed bag. I mean, just getting someone that has a lifting background doesn't necessarily mean that you're in good hands, because that person may be applying a clinical model, a conventional clinical model to your rehab, where they could have been applying, other knowledge that they may or may not have had that would be of more benefit to you. So it is a very, unfortunately, there's not going to be like a walk into the clinic and if you see these three things, you're in the right place. One big thing is honestly going to be referrals. If you can find someone that like, oh, I worked with this person and they did this, then you probably know that you're working with someone that's, more likely to be competent and helpful for your situation. For my clients, what I've found is some seem to be helpful. I had, in fact, the only client that I've ever fired was a client that insisted on seeing a PT every 2 weeks. And you talked about, Bill, going through painful ranges of motion, which you do have to do, but there is a limitation there, right? There's a healthy medium. And sometimes you're getting injured at the physical therapist clinic and actually sort of making things worse. And they'll tell you like, well, you have to go through pain. Well, there's a certain degree of pain you have to go through. But if you're, if you're not able to walk around normally for a few days because you're rehabbing a hip issue, then you're probably in the wrong place. It shouldn't be that painful. It shouldn't be that bad. You shouldn't be having to take a bunch of time off the gym because you went to the PT. Change is gradual in the body, and it doesn't involve ongoing and lasting pain. Just like if we're training someone, like, of course, normally when you're training, you shouldn't train through pain. You should train through discomfort, but not pain. That's a different, it's something that we always like to teach clients the difference, because if you haven't been in the gym, then you don't necessarily recognize the difference between discomfort and pain. And so learning what that means is sort of a piece of education that we like to pass on to everyone. But in a PT setting, you're going to have some pain in those sessions. That is normal and good. But what you should be judging the efficacy by is, one, are you making progress over the long term? And two, are you crippled the next day? It might be that you feel kind of stretched out or have some degree of discomfort and tenderness the next day, like you may when you're training in the gym. But you shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, I have to like sit around for a day after going to that PT, because that means that they probably went a little bit too far.
Yeah. So pain is like 80% neurological. And so pain should be reduced if you're moving properly through the ranges that are painful. And in the right way. It should never be an increase in experienced pain, because typically that's a neurological signal that you have done more damage, and the body is now indicating to you that it expects more pain in that range and position. And so if the PT is not reducing the pain, reliably over time, then that neurological signal is never getting reset to the point that it should be, so that you can work on the actual injury. The truth is that most injuries are very acute. They're like in this much of a space in your body. They're very small. Even catastrophic injuries that people are like, oh my gosh, it was a grade 2 ACL tear. Yeah, it's like that big. And so the idea is that you feel pain going everywhere out from the injury, right? Because of the nervous pathways. And so you have to calm all those other nervous pathways down so that you can pinpoint precisely where the injury is and where it's emanating from, the origin, and hopefully you have imaging as well if you have a catastrophic injury. But that will dictate the protocol. And that's why protocol models, like you're talking about, Justin, don't make sense, because there's no way to heal the same injury between two different people with the same protocol. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Because people are built so vastly different, especially in the areas of the body like closed joint capsules that get injured, right?
Yeah.
Every single person is so individual based on what they do in their everyday life and how they grew up, and if they broke a bone, and if they did this and that, and what they do at the, whatever.
And some of it isn't going to show up on imaging too. Imaging
Right.
is important, but like you still have to go off of results. You still have to go off of what the patient is experiencing. You have to go off of like what's going on during time. And one of those things that you should be looking for, and I think that this is kind of what you're saying, Bill, is you should be experiencing less pain from those sessions over time. Like the first ones may be more pain, but that pain level should be decreasing as a result of, okay, I went through a full range of motion. It hurts less to do that over time. Therefore, I'm getting good results.
Yeah. Your brain
That's
should
exactly
know.
what's being done whenever you are stretching, is you're teaching your central nervous system to reach farther. Not necessarily that you're actually stretching those ligaments, those tendons out. Of course, there's some of that going on, but you're training your nervous system. It's the same thing with things like this. I wanted to go back to something that each of you said. Justin, you talked about a lot of the time PTs are just wanting to get a larger range of motion, not necessarily strength. And Bill, you mentioned the having to go through insurance and all of this stuff. And I think those two things combined are why the elderly often are stuck in PT forever. If it's an athlete, you are really typically going to want to get better. You're kind of fighting to get out of there and back to what you're doing. But the elderly get taken advantage by this with the medical system, just getting range of motion. And we know they need to build strength. That's the only thing that's really going to prevent further injury and elongate their lives.
Yeah, and one of the worst fleeces is care homes that provide in-house PT for that, because they bill them separately for the PT sessions, or it's rolled into their cost of living in a care facility. And so that's a thing to really watch out for if you've got elderly parents or folks that you are a primary caretaker for, and they require a care facility. You should outsource their PT as often as possible to someone you trust. Because the reality is that those places are already fleecing people for money. That's already crookery, and I'm not going to go on that rant here. However, if somebody you care about requires that, you should outsource the PT to someone that you trust.
Yeah, I totally agree.
In-house.
Yeah, and one thing that someone is capable of affording it, you should look for a cash clinic that doesn't accept insurance, or that isn't gonna, or that will work outside of the insurance system for you. Not everyone can do this because you might not have the money for it. But at the same time, one visit a week isn't usually crazy expensive to pay in cash. Just like, certain other, like we'll talk about chiropractors later. A lot of that's not covered by insurance, especially these days. And so like someone that is not beholden to the insurance models for treatment and care, because the point of insurance is not to make you better. The point of insurance is to offset cost and to reduce cost and to profit from, you, however that may or may not look. So like it doesn't mean that everyone that takes insurance is bad. It just means that there should be a degree of caution when you're working in that kind of setting, because ultimately a doctor that's being paid by an insurance company works for the insurance company. That's their payer. Yeah. And
prevention doesn't have a billing code, so
it doesn't. It definitely doesn't. Yeah, cool. So I think that probably does it pretty well for PTs. It is a mixed bag, and so you have to be discerning. The best you can do is probably to find someone that works with athletes, because they're going to be the most pragmatic type of approach, and that is flexible, and that maybe worked with an athlete that you may know, whether you're an athlete yourself or not. Find someone that like is focused on sports rehab and that kind of thing. They're going to be more results focused than a clinic that is, marketing themselves to, like the go-to place for your, knee surgery rehab and things like that. And that's like all they work with. or that is mostly trying to attract older folks and things like that, they're probably just going to be less results driven, and just more beholden to insurance carriers, in my opinion.
Yeah. And probably very knowledgeable on movement mechanics more so.
Yeah. They yeah. And, honestly, even the let's say like the bad ones, the lower tier PTs will know about movement, but they won't know about how to get you moving better. That's the big difference is like, and just like we talked about before, just restoring range of motion, that's good, but that's the first baby step. Like if you want to prevent further injury, you're going to have to move to strengthening, and that means building muscle mass. That means progressive overload. That means actual like strength training of some kind. It's not going to involve just stretching muscles. Stretching muscles don't grow them. Stretching muscles doesn't make you stronger. It actually can make you weaker. We have good evidence for that. It doesn't mean you shouldn't stretch. Go ahead and stretch. I put stretches on my programs all the time, and I stretch myself as warranted, as needed. But just exercise a degree of caution, I guess, is what I would say.
Yeah, right. And I think that range of motion thing is a really important point to drive home. Amanda, can you still do the splits in either direction?
I'm actually pretty close on one side, but
so the front splits is the one I often think of, just because hip shape there doesn't matter. I've been in the front splits numerous times in my life, and I can tell you not one time when I was down there was I relaxed. Not one time. Muscles are working. You have to be strong in the range, and if you're not strong in the range and you're totally flat when you're down there, you're going to get injured. Right. So if a doctor increases range of motion, but they don't increase strength, that's immediately going to get you injured when you go back to use strength in that range.
Yeah, because you're used to going to further limits, which actually like puts you in a weakened position. But if you're not stronger in that weakened position, then you could open yourself up to injury. Like hypermobility is an injury risk, and if you get yourself into a hypermobile state without being strong, you could be setting yourself up for a problem down the line.
Well, that's Ehlers-Danlos, right? That's EDS. That's precisely what that is.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that we're kind of finding that more and more people have. I've run into more and more people that have it. I think just because there's more awareness of it. So it's something that you should be cautious of if you're someone that's in that boat too, because restoring range of motion after an injury is going to be really easy for you. But the first like thing you should be turning toward once you have range of motion is get those joints stronger, so that you're going to be more in a position to prevent future injury.
Agreed.
Yeah, so not every hypermobility is that syndrome.
No.
Sometimes you're just hypermobile. I've never been on the hypermobile side. I had to fight, scratching my nails into the floor to get my splits. I just happened to keep one side. I have a dominant side like most gymnasts do. There's no way the other side will be close.
Yeah, and what you realize too is that you're doing the splits far before you ever reach the floor. That's sort of physiologically what I'm talking about. The joint itself is 180 degrees before you ever hit the floor. Yeah. So what you're really training is the strength of the muscle spindles to be strong in that stretch position. And so like Amanda was saying, you're not technically really lengthening your muscle. That's not what you are, but it's lengthening to a length that already is possible to lengthen.
Like if you think that you can't, then go talk to a surgeon that does any sort of like joint replacement or something like that. They'll tell you all about what they do in the operating room. They move joints all over the place, and it doesn't actually cause injury. They're not tearing things when they do that.
Yeah, when you're asleep, you're completely mobile, 100%. You're unconscious. Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's talk about chiropractors a little bit. I started seeing chiropractors when I was a teenager, when I started experiencing thoracic back pain. And I had chronic thoracic back pain all the way until my later 20s, when I started taking training more seriously. Like I even trained regularly a lot, but I didn't gain muscle mass. I didn't eat enough protein, enough food in general. I didn't use progressive overload. I just sort of like did the gym bro, like go around, goof off. Sometimes I got heavier, sometimes I got lighter, depending on how I felt that day. Didn't really get anywhere. And so the pain persisted. So I saw chiropractors on and off for, over 10 years, I guess I would say. And I would experience relief from back pain for, like a handful of days after going. And then by the time it was time to go, to the chiropractor a week later, it was like, oh yeah, I could use an adjustment, which is a probably a poor term, because when you adjust something, you are taking something and putting it in a different position and it stays there. If you've adjusted anything mechanically, then when you leave it, it is in a different position or state. And what a lot of chiropractors will say is that they are realigning the spine and causing a actual durable change. But all the clinical evidence we have seems to suggest that there are no durable changes that you can make from joint manipulation. The only durable changes you can really make to your posture and your spinal alignment is typically going to be from accruing muscle mass and actually like actively changing your posture and that sort of thing. And one thing to note too is everybody has a twisted spine. Everybody has some degree of, like, I'd almost say pre-scoliosis. Nobody has a perfect spine. Everybody's spine twists to the side at some degree. Everybody's spine is twisted and not perfectly aligned, and there's not much correlation between what we would say a mechanical, I don't want to say deformity, but a mechanical misalignment and even the experience of pain. I've done a lot of imaging on people and studies where they found that people have had herniated discs and were totally asymptomatic, and other people that have horrible back pain, just almost debilitating back pain, and they can find no mechanical deformity whatsoever on imaging. There's not really a correlation between pain, the experience of pain, and actual like real mechanical deformity in the back. So like, if you hear a chiropractor talking that way, then it's probably someone that doesn't really understand what they're doing. And this is what they teach in pretty much every school. And so the chiropractors that are more competent are going to be ones that have continued their studies post graduation and come to learn what they're actually doing and what they're actually capable of, and what the limitations may be as far as what their practice is and what they're actually doing that may be actually helping people. So I kind of hand over to you guys. So like, Amanda, what's your experience been personally with chiropractors and that sort of thing?
The first time I ever went to a chiropractor was because I had a pinched nerve near the SI joint. It wasn't quite like sciatica. It was a little bit higher. And so I went to a chiropractor. There's different kinds, all kinds of variation in practices, but this one was one that actually accepted insurance, did full x-rays, all of that stuff. And so the alignment that they called it was actually very gentle. I feel like they're a little more gentle when they're like the x-ray type of chiropractor. And it did help. It did relieve the pain. I did heal from whatever pinch there was. Of course, I don't know if that just was due to my pain was relieved and then I would move a little bit more, or whatever it may be. There's clinics now, of course, that take cash. You just go in, they'll feel around. They're not actually doing a full exam with x-rays or anything like that. They'll just give you an adjustment, and a lot of them are the same adjustments. It's not tailored to whatever you're dealing with. It's just, everyone gets the same few things done. I'm not completely anti-chiropractor. I use it in prep whenever I'm posing a lot, and I just feel tight and tense and all of that. And it helps to make that feel better. Perhaps what's happening there is helping me return to a parasympathetic state, or just, maybe there's a placebo effect. The placebo effect is a very real thing. And one of the disadvantages to the more you know is the placebo effect gets you a little less. But if it works, it's still working for me. I still go every once in a while, but it's not like I'm going because I feel like something's misaligned. It's not because I think it's going to do anything for digestion or heart or brain or whatever it may be.
Cancer prevention. I've heard that.
Not cancer prevention or anything like that. So I still utilize it. It's just important to know what's actually happening there. Like, this is just synovial fluid that's getting a decrease in pressure, that's getting a little air bubble in there and it makes a popping sound. Same thing happens when you just pop your fingers all day long. It's not any different than that. Of course, you have to be very careful when you're manipulating the neck, because you can cause a stroke, not that same day even. It can come later. So you need to find somebody who's very aware of what they're doing if you are going to go. Most of the reasons people do go to a chiropractor, though, really should be resolved by becoming stronger. If it's because you sit at a desk all day and you're slouching, then you need to work on your strength. You need to be actively aware of your posture when you're sitting. You need to actively strengthen your spine. Just going to get it popped is not going to do anything to relieve that curvature of the spine from sitting the way that you
Yeah.
sit at a desk for that long. So that's where stress, as not stress, that's where strength is the important thing to focus on. Not going to pop your way out of a hunchback.
Yeah, I agree. That mirrors my experience too. Like, you do get real pain relief. Again, pain is an experience, and I think part of it is just that getting the air bubbles out of the, out of the joint that has, potential merit in it for, as far as temporal, acute joint pain relief and things like that. But it's not going to change the alignment of the spine. It's not going to have. It's more like this gets you out of a painful state. It sort of compensates temporarily. It's almost like taking like ibuprofen or getting a massage or something like that. Like, this is something that can actually help you in the moment to deal with something that's going on. But when you're looking for the long-term solution to the problem, getting your back popped is not really going to do a whole lot. And you brought up a good point too with being careful of injury, because like people have gotten nerve damage from chiropractors, especially with the neck. The neck is very fragile. And so like you have to be very discerning. Like if you can like take, again, recommendations from people in your own network are probably going to be the best, because you get the benefit of someone else having tried the chiropractor first to know if they're like actually going to be useful. And again, I would be looking for someone that has some sort of sports rehab background, because they're going to understand movement better, and they're going to probably be more pragmatic in their approach. Bill, you've worked with chiropractors in the past, right?
Yeah, and this is a big contention between physiologists and chiropractors, right? Is the manipulation of the spine.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give a couple of primers on a few things just to help everybody understand kind of a framework for what works and what doesn't and why and those things. So one of the things to understand is that the pain relief that you get from having your back popped is the release of endorphins. And that coupled with the placebo effect of the release of pressure, right, really helps. And so here's a cool test that you can do. Like, if you have a knot in your rhombus and you have somebody pop the joints, the joints, the thoracic joints near the rhombus, the pain will go away for a second. It'll be like, oh, that feels better. I'm moving better. But the problem wasn't in the joint capsule of the spine. It was in your muscle. Your muscle was tight, and then it got a rush of endorphins, and so it relaxed, and then it was no longer tight. And so the knot is no longer there. You can it's sort of like taking a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory. It sort of does that. It just rushes stuff in and rushes it out, and all of a sudden everything is relaxed, and you feel a little bit better, for a period. Now that knot may come back depending on what's going on there. You probably have some kind of very small acute injury if you've got a knot or if you've got a crick in your back or your neck somewhere. And so that's sort of why the manipulation works physiologically. And by the way, it's great. It's a great form of neuromuscular facilitation. And that's, as long as you understand that's what you're doing, then yeah, perfect. Like, go to the chiropractor for sure. Because it does provide that neuromuscular facilitation. It can get you out of a bunch of little tiny nagging tweaks just from that production of endorphins, right? And some of the placebo effect from the release of pressure. It can get you moving a little better. And the movement is really what's going to massage everything and help you get ultimately better, right? Which is a really great thing. So for that purpose, it's awesome. And it's nice to have somebody that's a professional do it, right? Instead of doing it yourself. You can do it yourself, right? But again, you do risk nerve damage and things like that if you do it wrong and do it too
Those
extreme.
school desks were the best. The ones that like the arms.
The best.
Are attached.
Best. So, but most of what people are experiencing with back pain is an atrophy in one part of the back, usually the erectors. The erectors are like the biggest part of the back that sits underneath the traps, and the traps are actually part of the erectors. And so your actual back muscles, not the muscles that sit over your back, the big bulbous ones we see when you flex, but the muscles that are your actual back, the tissue underneath all the muscles, is basically just flat muscular sheets that hang on hooks of cartilage and bone. And so they can't actually flex on their own. They're just sort of there for the sake of stability. They are just literal stability holder muscles. They're not meant to move or tighten or that stuff. And so what you're feeling is those larger supporting muscles, your back is on the clock all the time and it should be working. And if it's not, your back's going to get sore. Yeah. Because those muscles, that tissue underneath the muscles is getting really worn out, and it's pulling apart from itself like this on those hooks, and it just causes inflammation and soreness. Not the worst thing in the world, but it definitely is a thing, right? And people feel that. And so when they get their back popped, it sort of helps, those endorphins kind of help that immediate pain go away. They can get to moving again, and then hopefully they strengthen that area up. If they're hurting there, they're usually going to focus on it. And so that means that when they're focusing on developing that part of the body, it gets better, right? The second primer is that it is never physiologically appropriate to manipulate the neck. There's a whole lot of research on this. It's never appropriate. And the reason is because the pressure that builds up in the joint capsules in the neck isn't a direct cause of any kind of nervous or muscular pain in the neck. And subluxation of discs in the neck is actually better solved through extension. And so most chiropractors will know this, and most orthopedists worth their salt will know this. And if you go, hey, I've got chronic headaches, and they go, yeah, you've got something subluxed in your neck, it's causing your headaches, they're going to have you hang your head off your bed for a couple minutes a day, to try to shove that disc back in. And so it's never appropriate to manipulate the neck in any way, the way that like a chiropractor would, or even a physical therapist would. The best thing to do is to move the neck through normal ranges. I'm going to give a product shout out here. They don't pay me. I just use it because it's amazing. And my clients use it too. It's called the Iron Neck. You can do it's just a hat. It's, just a hat that you put on that's got bands attached to it, and it's got a resistance wheel inside of it, and you can move your neck through ranges of motion against pressure and tension. That's the way to relieve chronic neck pain, is to strengthen through those ranges and get your neck flexible in places where it's not flexible, strong in those places where it gains new flexibility. But the bones of the neck,
real quick on that.
Yeah.
With the Iron Neck, it can be a great tool. A lot of people are going too heavy with them.
Yeah.
A lot of people, like, you shouldn't be lifting.
No,
you shouldn't treat it like when you're lifting weights and you're like going to go to failure and all this stuff.
No,
like if you attach that thing to a cable machine, you're using like the one plate. You're using like the 5 pound or the 10 pound.
You don't need hardly anything at all.
Yeah.
You're
not
moving.
A progressive overload situation where you're trying to get to the point where you're like anywhere approaching failure.
Yeah, it's actually active mobility. It's not even really lifting anything for the neck. Yeah. You're just doing active mobility. So you only need as much resistance as it takes to get a little bit of pull. And that's plenty. And so that's a great point. But the bones of the neck offer no medical benefit when they're manipulated. There is a lot of risk with manipulating them, for sure, a lot of risk. There are obviously your carotid arteries that are there as well. And a lot of people don't know this, but the things in your body float around. So your body is never like stuck. Your organs move around during the day, and your vascular system moves around during the day. If you lay on your side, your heart actually drifts over to your rib cage and stuff. It's kind of scary when you think about it, but that's just how the body works. And, and it's totally natural. When you manipulate the neck, what can happen is you can do a couple things. You can tear the carotid artery, unfortunately, and it will show up later as a blood clot, and you could have a stroke. The other thing is that the artery itself can get caught when that pressure releases and then comes back together, and it can get pinched, right? Which is a really bad situation. That's the cases where you'll see them get their neck popped, and all of a sudden they go like catatonic, and it's because that's been caught and they have a real problem. They're not getting blood flow to their brain. And so it's never really appropriate to manipulate the neck. The other thing is about chiropractic work in general. I'm going to give this primer, and it's going to make people upset, and it doesn't matter because it's true. Okay. It was invented by a guy named D.D. Palmer.
Yeah.
Who was a whack job. And I mean whack job. He had absolutely zero medical basis for anything he was claiming, which, by the way, his primary claim was that he made a near deaf man no longer deaf by manipulating his lumbar spine, which makes no sense given the nervous pathways anyway, but whatever. But he made that claim, and he pushed this chiropractic stuff on everybody as a practice. And
There's
just
also a lot of spiritualist type of
he
claims.
was a spirit. He was a spiritist, right? And he did believe in spiritual alignment through back manipulation and things like that. So there's quite a bit of sort of weirdness there. And the other thing I will say is he pushed it as a way to make himself famous and as a way to make money. I will say this, that the FDA called chiropractic work quackery, an extremely dangerous practice of non-medicine, right? For many, many years, up to like the 60s, right? Yeah. It was for many, many years. They said this is exceedingly dangerous and is not a functional medical practice with any kind of benefit that at least D.D. Palmer was claiming, right?
I think too that one thing with that is, I think that in order to legitimize the practice of the chiropractic practice in general, it was more of a rebranding. Yeah. So the practices, the methodology remained the same. However, the language became more physiological rather than spiritual, and therefore it gained legitimacy. But the practice, what was actually being done, the manipulations and everything didn't really change. It was more of a rebranding. Let's just call it something else.
Yeah. So it's interesting because the language used there, it belies the real intention of the original practice. The words adjustment and alignment, like you said, they are not things that apply to the human spine. Those are spiritual terms that they were using for the sake of aligning energies in the body, making adjustments to flow of energy in the body, and things like that. And now we all know we have bioelectric energy in our body. We're not trying to say we don't, but the point is, like, there was this real supernatural spiritist kind of almost druidism to it, right? And sort of shamanism as well, right? Where he became sort of a cult figure and aligned folks to himself in a sort of celebrity that was unfounded because he had never really done anything of note, right, in the medical field. And so the word adjustment and the word alignment can't possibly apply to your spine because that would kill you. An aligned spine, you would die. If your spine was in a perfect line, you die. And if it was,
especially if you're someone that has any degree of what we'd say deformity, because if you were to immediately move it into that position, then you could experience severe injury.
Right. The spine is not meant to be shaped. It's shaped like a line. It's meant to be S-shaped. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And so it's not meant to be aligned. That's not what a spine does. And in fact, part of the strength of the spine is its shape. It's the reason it can take so much load and some things like that. And so alignment would be a weird word. Adjustment to the spine would be catastrophic. If you adjusted a joint capsule in the spine, you would paralyze someone. That's what happens when people get hit by cars. It adjusts their spine in a permanent way, and they are crippled. Yeah. And so those words are not physiological terms that apply to the spine. And so just so that people understand, they've taken those terms and tried to make them physiological, but they are originally spiritism, and they are terms found in spiritism for the things that D.D. Palmer and his ilk were trying to practice. Now, that doesn't mean that every chiropractor you run into is some whack job. However, what I would say is, if I were to give a couple warning signs, they would be this. One would be, is their primary business chiropractic work, or is it selling supplements?
That's a big one.
Yeah.
If it's selling supplements, you can't trust them. Just don't. Just do not. You need to run from there as quick as you can. If they're promoting an alternative lifestyle as part of their chiropractic work, you need to get out of there immediately. That is not a legitimate medical practice. That is wild. I had a chiropractor tell me that when I was going there early on, they said, you're eating too much meat and you are consuming the animal's psychology. And I'm just going to let you put those terms together so that you know how much of a nonsense phrase something like that is, like their study of the psyche. That would be so weird. What they meant was that that I was consuming the animal's stress and it was causing me issues and things like that. I mean, these are quacks, right?
Yeah.
It's folks that don't know anything about medicine. The second one is, are they primarily a chiropractor or are they primarily an anti-aging clinic? And if they're primarily an anti-aging clinic, get out of there. Don't let them do anything to your spine. Don't let them do anything to your neck. Don't let them do anything to your neck anyway, but don't let them do anything to your spine. Because how they make their money is where their real focus is and shows you what they're actually trying to do as a practice, right? I actually was helped by a very forward-thinking chiropractor, and you will find some of them. When I herniated my L4 and L5, he was one of the first chiropractors and the only ones at that time that was doing extension therapy versus traction therapy. And so traction therapy further degrades the disc of the spine. We know that now. You know, that's why inversion tables, you don't really see them much anymore and stuff like that, because it's not really healthy for the spine. But extension therapy works on the idea that you have two pockets of the spine. You have the nerve pocket on the outside of the spine. That's the back of the spine. And then you have a cartilage pocket on the inside of the spine that has no nervous system attached to it whatsoever. And so if you push that disc back into that pocket, so you sublux it, instead of going back towards your posterior, you anteriorly sublux it, it will get stuck in that pocket and now can no longer touch any nerves. It still supports the spine. It actually makes more room for synovial fluid, so it degrades much slower. And on that note, it's also to say that spinal degradation is normal.
Yeah.
As you age, your discs are going to degrade. That's just totally natural. It doesn't mean you're going to be crippled. It doesn't mean you're going to experience any level of pain. None of that means anything except you're just simply aging, right?
Yeah.
And so there are good chiropractors out there that'll teach you those things. And any good chiropractor worth their salt, you know, you'll know they'll primarily be a chiropractor only, right? Not a supplement salesperson and not an anti-aging clinic. Okay. But instead, they're legitimately going to do things to try to give you that endorphin, you know, sort of rush to help you get pain free. And then if they're a good chiropractor, they're going to send you to the gym. They're going to go, hey, you need to deadlift. You need to do Jefferson curls. You need to do squats. You need to do what's ever appropriate, right? To strengthen that area that's lacking, that's giving you the pain. And if they don't do that, then, you know, it's probably not worth the money to spend on them, because, you know, most of them don't accept insurance. And if they do, boy, it is, man, it's whack in the ones that do. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, again, there can be helpful ones. We're not saying that nobody's going to be helpful, but we all have to understand the limitations of our scope of practice, like, and what, you know, what you can recommend. I personally know someone that was considering strength training and diet and all that stuff, and she had some issues that those things would have resolved. She instead turned to a chiropractor at the recommendation of a family member who also used them, and just wound up spending a bunch of money on supplements and actually felt worse, like a lot worse. But kept being told, like, no, just keep taking the supplements. It'll get better. But you got to get through this. And several months in, still nothing. Kept doing it for a very long time, and it was very expensive too. And that's what often you see from the more quacky type of chiropractors, is they're selling supplements right there in the clinic, and that's actually where they're making a lot of profit. Not that you shouldn't take supplements. We all take supplements for various reasons, but there could be kind of a conflict of interest there. And like, are they effective? Because a lot of the supplements they're selling are things that don't do anything. They're not like the first thing they should be pushing you toward, you know, is like, if anything, like your normal vitamins. Like, are you taking vitamin C and zinc? You probably should, because most Americans need that. And like creatine, whether you train or not. Like, if they're pushing you to take, you know, whatever extract from some seed or whatever it is, or some root or something, it's probably not going to do anything for you. It's probably going to cost a lot of money. It might make you feel worse. Like, a lot of the stuff that I see pushed is stuff we've warned people against. That's like, you know, mushroom derived, which not everything mushroom derived is bad necessarily, but it's like, you know, the type of stuff that's like SSRI mimicking and manipulating serotonin and that kind of thing. And that's not addressing root cause, often makes you feel worse and can create dependencies and can even sometimes be toxic for your body long term.
Yeah, if they're recommending something like astaxanthin before they recommend that you eat more berries, just get out of there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if their lifestyle solutions for you are not things like eat more protein and fruit and vegetables and
Go for walks.
go for walks, get some sun exposure, things like that. If they're automatically putting you on supplements without helping you correct all the majors, right?
Yeah.
Just know that that's quackery. There's no way to know that those supplements are going to help you anyway. And these are, we see them so often, is these sort of ought statements in medicine where they go, well, you ought to, be taking this or be taking that. Well, why? Like if there's no indicator, right, that you should be taking that symptomatically, if there's no indicator in blood work as well that you should be doing any of that, then don't do it.
Yeah.
And so that's that's one of the biggest things that you can do is look at it and go, what are they actually selling me? Is it a miracle cure for something that can't possibly be cured through spinal manipulation? Spinal manipulation is not going to make you lose weight. Sorry.
Nope.
No.
If you're fat, then that's because you're eating too much food and not exercising enough.
And if you want to prevent or promote like better nervous system signaling in the spine, like you need a spine that's strong, obviously,
Right.
one, so that it's being supported properly. And two, like probably the next thing is going to be red light therapy or sunlight exposure directly to the back because of the electron donation and the healing. Like when you expose yourself to infrared light, it is going all the way down to the bone marrow. There's signaling that's happening all the way to that level. It is promoting better electron balance. It's donating electrons. It's increasing mitochondrial efficiency and everything like that. That's actually like efficacious for promoting better signaling and healing potentially. Yeah. But like taking like 20 grams a day of whatever powder, it's not going to make your spine work better.
No, and I think the other thing is if you're going to eat nothing but Kentucky Fried Chicken for every meal and not watch your sleep and you're going to smoke, don't worry about the chiropractor or any of the supplements. It's not going to do anything for you. And don't worry about doing any of the other stuff either. The red light therapy, all that stuff. That's great. It's awesome. It works. However, as we always tout, the basics, right? You got to get that down first. These are ancillaries. They're not the primary movers. And so
look at other factors too that can cause spinal pain. Like you spend that money at the chiropractor.
Yeah.
Are you sleeping in a bed that's terrible? Are you sitting in an office chair that's terrible? Or are you just sitting too much in general?
Yeah.
Like those are the things you should be looking at. Like going for a walk is free.
Yeah. Well, and people with neck pain, one of the things I'll find all the time with clients with neck pain, they're sleeping with their head too low because their neck is so weak that they're used to having to lay it on something. And I'm like, your head should be up here even. Like there should be this much space between you and the bed, right? Like that much space. That's a lot of space. If there's not that much space between you and the bed, your neck, you're not doing your neck any favors. And they go, oh my gosh, but when I sleep like that, it hurts. It's like, yeah, because your muscles are starting to engage and hold your neck in that position properly. And so it hurts for the first couple of weeks because you're making a physiological adjustment, to how you're resting and things like that. So there's a bunch of that stuff, that's really simple that can be changed that doesn't A, cost a fortune and B, require a bunch of supplements or magic, right, to take care of. So,
one thing I've noticed too with
Go ahead. I was going to say along this vein with physical therapy and chiropractic is also massage. There's even chiropractors who use massage because if a muscle is incredibly tight, it's easier to adjust once there has been a little bit of massage, which then wouldn't that mean the muscle was to blame, not the spine?
Right. Yeah.
That's like a cart, like chicken and egg type of scenario right there where it's like, well, I think maybe the loosening the muscle did the real work here.
Yeah.
Right. Massage is something I'd recommend way before chiropractic.
Absolutely.
There is real benefit there. Just to dispel some myths, though, it is not releasing toxins. Your liver and your kidneys detox. Your muscles do not. But you can kind of wring out muscles like a sponge, so there's more fluid than present in the body when you have a massage. So really, that's why water is encouraged to drink after a massage, not because you've released toxins, but because you've just squeezed out a bunch of fluid and you You're helping
Yeah.
it actually
The
get that
re-
circulation.
I think
yeah,
a big part of what you're doing too is you're getting the nervous system to relax the muscle. That's
Yeah.
the I think the
Yeah.
biggest key is after whatever it is, training or due to being in the same position too long or something like that because of sitting or whatever, your muscles just stay tight, and that's a nervous system thing. And that external manipulation does seem to actually let the muscles relax a little bit. And
Yeah.
by the way, you can often accomplish this yourself with percussion massage and stretching.
Yeah.
I found that to work really, really well. And often is very, very effective.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is to note that if you've never seen a muscle, there's so much blood in a muscle.
Yeah.
When you get deep tissue massage, like Amanda said, you're pushing out a bunch of fluid. You are also bleeding. That's why you feel sickly afterwards. And so not just water, but some food. A little bit of sugar would be great. A little bit of juice is appropriate. Because you are bleeding. That's what's happening. When they do deep tissue massage, you're bleeding. You will bruise and things like that. But your muscles,
your blood pressure can
your
drop
blood pressure
quite a
will
bit
go
after
up.
massage.
Exactly. And so there is a real physiological effect in that regard. But it's not toxins. Yeah, to Amanda's point, it certainly isn't that. And but sometimes that neuromuscular facilitation, to Justin's point, it can be just what you need to get going again, right? And the getting going is the most sort of critical part.
Yeah.
And I think that's common between PTs, chiropractic work, massage therapy, any neuromuscular facilitation that you're doing. The point of it is to get you moving again, because the movement is the thing that makes the difference, right?
Yeah.
The movement's the big deal.
It really is.
I'll give a medical anecdote from this. When older folks break their hip, if they do not go to PT very quickly, they forget how to walk, and when they forget how to walk, they die. I mean, reliably. Because mobility is what keeps your metabolic systems running. The ability to be ambulatory is actually what helps keep you alive. And so, if you are not able to move yourself from place to place easily, you're going to have more disease. You're going to have more physical issues with the body, injury, etc. Simply because your body's not working as well as it possibly can. Because you're just not ambulatory. And so movement is the critical part.
Yeah. And one quick tip too, when it comes to neck pain, something I've noticed sometimes, the root cause of neck pain isn't always the neck. It actually sometimes can be the lumbar spine. It seems like there's a correlation just because the body seeks balance, because if your hips are tilted, or we should say your pelvis is tilted, like, over too much posterior, too much anterior, there's going to be a compensation elsewhere in the spine. This could be in the thoracic spine or in your neck or something like that. If that's the case, it can present as neck pain, and the other part of your spine might feel okay, but you might actually just need to have a stronger core, a stronger lower back to actually deal with the issue. I've seen lower back issues. I should say, I've seen neck pain issues resolve with strengthening of the lower spine numerous times, because it's not always the thing that hurts that's the problem. It might be a symptom of something else that's going on.
Yeah, I think
it can even go all the way down to your feet. I had flat feet, and I was a gymnast, and I wasn't doing anything to care for my arches or learn how to hold them properly, and it presented as thoracic back pain and pelvic pain, in my outside of my hips, and that it was all my feet, because when that falls, then your knees cave in, then your hips are rotated the wrong way, then you're slouching because you have a lumbar curve that doesn't belong there, and then it just goes all the way up the chain.
Yeah, and I think the key to that hypothesis, that it comes from lower in the chain, is the pulling feeling that people get on their traps and at the lower neck where the insertion is. They'll go, "Oh man, my head freaking is killing me back here. My neck's killing me back here." If your traps were engaged, if your back was the problem, they'd be doing this, right? Mm-hmm. But the fact that you feel them getting pulled down means something else is tight, and they're unable to engage properly, and they're holding a bunch of tension from something else, right? And so, I think that hypothesis is right on.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think we beat the dead horse pretty well here. We're not saying that PTs and chiropractors have no use. They can have a use. It's just that we need to understand them in context, that they are for the relief of acute injuries, rehab settings, things like that. But the goal is to return to homeostasis and become stronger by becoming stronger. So anybody
Yes.
that's looking for help with this kind of thing, of course, you can go to highcallingfitness.com. We can help you change your lifestyle, help not just with programs, but help you design a lifestyle that's sustainable and sets you up to hopefully have less back pain, have less pains in general, and just become more resilient, as a human being, and more capable for yourself, for your family, for your community, for your church, because ultimately we are physical beings, and if we have physical limitations, then that limits our ability to do what we're called to do. So if anyone wants to book a call with us and just have a chat, no obligations, highcallingfitness.com. We'd love to talk to you. And thanks, Bill and Amanda, for sharing your experience and expertise. Really appreciate it. And we'll look forward to the next one. Until then, gains and grace.
Gains and grace.
Gains and grace.